Takže dobrý večer, good evening. I would like to introduce an astronaut, Paolo Nespoli, who was in ESA staff up to 2019, and from the number of people who are here today, I see that a lot of people were interested and are interested in space and are expecting some in personal view on the past, present, and future of space by an insider. Stage is yours.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. I'm really sorry. I need to speak English because my Czech is non-existent. So I have to put you through this speaking in English situation. Yes, as we mentioned, I'm going to talk about, a little bit the status of human spaceflight as it is today. But then we start thinking a little bit about tomorrow, after tomorrow, and even after tomorrow. So something that nobody knows. This is it's called CV or curriculum vitae. There's a lot of things. Usually what I point out is that, okay, let me go back here, is that I point out that I am an engineer. I point out that I'm an engineer because when I discuss with my wife in the middle of the discussion, she kind of stops me and says, "Oh, you're really an engineer, eh?" And I don't know what that means, but it must mean something because, I don't know. There are engineers in here? Some physicists. So you get the same thing, more or less. Sooner or later, you get the same thing. So I was fortunate enough to fly in space, to be selected as an astronaut to start with, but flying space the first time on a 15 days mission on the space shuttle. This was STS-120. This is the patch of the mission. It's kind of interesting because if you look at the patches, these days, actually it's always been like this. On the patch, there is always the name of the mission, the name of the astronaut, and sometimes some flag. Since this was on the space shuttle, it was an American mission, the only flag there is the Italian one because it's out of standard in a certain way. Coming back from this flight, I thought I would fly again on the space shuttle. After all, I trained like 10 years before being able to fly. But then they assigned me to a mission on the space station. And not only that, they sent me to Russia to get qualified to fly on the Russian spacecraft, the Soyuz spacecraft. And this is the patch of that mission, which was not anymore a short duration mission. 15 days is supposed to be short. This was about almost 6 months. And here's the patch of the mission with the name of the missions of this Soyuz TMA-20, name of the astronaut, and the various flags. Since this is international now, there are all the flags in there. When I came back from that mission, this was a long, staying in space 6 months. It's can be kind of heavy duty. So I thought, I'm finished with my career of an astronaut. I was already getting close to 60 years old. No astronaut has flown at that age, at that time. So I almost thought, that's it, I'm not going to be assigned anymore. But they assigned me in another mission in 2017 on Soyuz MS-05. Here it is again, the patch of the mission with the name of the astronaut and the various flags. I kind of point out these things because when I look at a picture like this, so where are we here? On the moon? I thought we were in Prague. Yeah, here we're in Prague. There they're on the moon. This is a picture of Buzz Aldrin taken by Neil Armstrong. That little thing in the white there is Neil Armstrong reflecting on the visor. Anyhow, this was Apollo 11, and if somebody looks at the patch of that mission, this is the patch, Apollo 11. It's kind of interesting because it's one of the few space mission patches where there are no names of the astronaut, there are no flags. It's kind of interesting situation. So now has human race, an American astronaut go to the moon for the first time as the first human, and they decide not to have the names, not to have the flags. Not only that, when Neil Armstrong stepped on the moon for the first time, he could have said, well, I'm Neil Armstrong, American, look how good I am, all these things. But he said something a little bit more strong, which is something like, it's a small step for a man, a giant leap for mankind. So signaling that this was a real step that was done in the name of everybody on Earth. And I guess, looking at you, there were not that many people present here tonight that were alive when this happened. I was a little kid, and I still remember, I was a little kid from Italy, and I felt I was going to the moon. Hey, look at this, I'm going to the moon. In fact, when people would ask me, what would you like to do when you grow up? I would say, of course, I want to be an astronaut. And people look at me like a little bit surprised because, little kid, Italian, in the middle of nowhere, wanted to go in space, going to the moon, kind of an impossible dream. But, I really, quote unquote, believed it. And in fact, a few months later, I started being a little bit even harder when they would say, so what do you want to do? I want to be an astronaut, I want to go in space, I want to go to the moon, I want to go and drive the lunar rover to see if I can do cartwheels on the moon. And people look at me like even more surprised. Oh, okay, that's a good idea. Study, you will go. Then they will turn around. This guy is crazy because what were the chances, even today, what are the chances somebody says, I want to be an astronaut, I want to go to the moon? What are the chances? There's no chances. Or there are very little chances, microscopic chances. So I ended up having this dream and realizing pretty soon that it was not something that could have been fulfilled very quickly. In fact, it took me several years, like almost 20 years from that picture, to be selected as an astronaut of the European Space Agency. In fact, I was selected in 1998 at my third try. So twice I was rejected by the ESA and still kept trying. And in 1998, I was selected and I was part of the Unified European Astronaut Corps. And at that time, there were, French, German, Italian, Spanish, Swedish, Swiss. So a lot of astronauts all over Europe, but we all worked together in Cologne, in Germany, where the European Astronaut Center is located. But when I showed up in Cologne, newly minted astronaut, I showed up with my carry-on, and they said, Paolo, don't open up your carry-on, because anyhow, we cannot do much here. In Europe, at that time, it's 1998, we did not have the capability to send people in space, to send astronauts in space. That was 1998. Today is 2023, and we still don't have the capability of sending people in space. Why? That's a good question. So we need to think as Europe, as countries, what we want to do, we need to, work together. We see people like Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos that, relatively simple guy that get crazy. And in Europe, we cannot do this. We need to, get our act together and start working on it. Anyhow, they told me at that time, we cannot send it to space, but the American can and the Russian can. So we are going to send some of you in training in Russia, some of you in training in the United States. And Russia or the United States will send you to space. And to me, it was interesting. It was interesting because they sent me to the United States, NASA. It's a little bit of light here. We cannot turn off a little bit more light here? Where is Houston? Okay, and so this was the NASA associated me to the 17th class of astronauts. It was a very interesting situation. It was a moment where NASA had very many astronauts. It was even difficult to, you are hired as an astronaut, but then we don't know when and how you're going to fly because we don't have that many flights. Anyhow, we started our training. It was kind of interesting. Well, thank you. It was kind of interesting. Very good. This is much better now. So we had, pilots, mission specialists, 23 Americans, 2 Italians, 1 French, 1 German, 1 Canadian, 1 Brazilian. But one interesting thing is that the class before us, the 16th class of astronaut, gave us the mascot of the class, which is this penguin. And we did not quite understand why the penguin. We understood later because the penguin is a bird that cannot fly. There you go. As an astronaut, but your mascot is a bird that cannot fly. Oh, thank you very much. Meaning, I don't know, go through the training, pick a number, like when you go, I don't know, quando vado al salumiere, when you go to buy something at the supermarket and they give you a number and you wait for your number to be called, like something like this. Pick a number, wait online, your turn. So it took quite some time. But one of the things that I immediately discovered is that, yes, in the 60s, 70s, the Americans did 6 missions to the moon. So 12 people put their foot on the moon. But in fact, since 1972, since Apollo 17, we never went that far away from Earth. In fact, we stay on a little, quote unquote, little, on an area which is called low Earth orbit. It's something that goes from 200 kilometers to 1,000 kilometers. We don't go really far away. The moon is really much farther away. We stay here on this low Earth orbit because what we want to do, we want to take advantage of the situation that we have when we are flying into here and carry out certain stuff. There is no need to go to the moon. If we want to go to the moon, we need to explore. But today, since 1972, we are not exploring. We already decided that, we saw the moon. Moon looks a lot like Earth, as probably is a piece of Earth. So there's no need to go up there. Let's stay on low Earth orbit. And still today, we cannot go above Leo. We have 2 rockets that could go up there, and they are being built right now by the Americans to go to the moon, to go back to the moon, to build a space station around the moon. But as of today, since 1972, we never went outside with humans. We never went outside the low Earth orbit. In fact, we used to go in low Earth orbit, first of all, with the space shuttle, which is a really incredible machine. If somebody would ask me as an engineer what I think about the space shuttle, I say, wow, space shuttle is an incredible machine. It's so capable, so complicated. You know, I teach engineering at a university in Italy, and one of the things that I call them my engineers, I tell them, you guys need to learn to design things simple, not complicated. Because as an engineer, we have the capability of taking something simple and make it complicated, which sometimes work, but a lot of times not. And the shuttle, I'm not quite sure I understood, but if it was part, oh, I forgot I was talking loud. Okay. Shuttle, an extremely interesting machine, very, very complicated, so complicated at the point that even NASA could not handle it anymore, and they decided to retire it, and they retired in 2011 after they used the shuttle to complete the space station, because space station could not have been completed without the space shuttle. So they completed the space station and then retired the space shuttle because it was far too complicated. By the way, there is a joke that they used to tell us when I was at NASA, like, do you know what is an elephant? It's a mouse built by a NASA engineer. So you start with a mouse and then eventually you get an elephant. Yeah, but it's a mouse. Yeah, you can call mouse. Okay. So shuttle was there, very incredible machine, very complicated, even to fly, a lot of training. It took quite some years to even get trained on flying the shuttle. In fact, NASA used, at that time, essentially three things to select, train, and flight assign astronauts. So they use cognitive skills and capabilities, professional qualities, procedural competences, meaning what are your capability in terms of concentration, memorization, perception, but also your capability in terms of scientific skills, engineering skills, technical skills, and even more procedural competences, how good you are in understanding, and they teach you the system, how good you are in following procedure, how good you are in coming up with solution when something doesn't work. So it was an interesting situation, and they trained us for years. I got trained on these things for almost 10 years. And here is some example. These are pictures taken when I was doing the initial training. So we were doing theoretical lessons, then simple simulation on simple training, simulated training machines. We were doing a lot of laboratory training because it turned out pretty quickly that, yes, you are an engineer, but if there is something that you need to do in a biomedical field, what do? You simply say, yeah, I'm an engineer, I cannot do biomedical. Also, if you're a doctor, can you do, I'm a doctor, I'm not working on the toilet. Doesn't work like that. As an astronaut, you need to be able to do everything. Here we are doing metallurgy. Here we are with 3 pilots. They've taken blood, one on each other, and then they are working on the blood to analyze the components. Here is one of my colleagues with the soldier in iron and some equipment. She's building a power supply. So it's a set of skills that not all of us has. But as an astronaut, you're not required to be excellent on everything, but you are required to be able to do anything at a decent level. And that's why you get through all this sort of laboratory. And that's why, for example, once in a while, they actually gave us some classes. This guy here with the shirt is actually Neil Armstrong. He came to our class, talked to us for 2 hours about what meant going to the moon, what meant breaking the sound barrier, X-15, this kind of things. It was very interesting and informative. But then we continue with the field trips. Here we went around for a week in New Mexico looking at rocks in a geology trip. Here we did water survival. We got training, what it means to be thrown in the middle of the ocean, and you have to call the helicopters. And if you're not going to call, you stay there looking at sharks flying around you. Parachute, we did land survival, which means, they threw us in a forest with almost nothing, and we stayed there 1 week, eating practically nothing, whatever we could find, which means nothing. But then it was really interesting because you can do these things. It's nothing really crazy. NASA had and still has a fleet of T-38s, which are military trainer. These things can actually fly supersonic. So it's like driving a Formula One car. It's not your, Toyota or something like this. And they make you fly on these things because this is operational skills. If you make a mistake on this thing, you're going to kill yourself. There are several astronauts that actually got killed in training with T-38. So it's something that you go on this thing and you learn to respect the machine, learn to understand what you're doing, learn to ask if there are things that you don't understand. And then the simulation got more and more complicated. Here it's a simulation with a full suit, but then it means that if you put the helmet on, you cannot talk anymore. Or at least if you talk over radio, meaning that if you talk, nobody else is talking. And if everybody talks, nobody understands everything. So you need to learn discipline, what to say, when to say it, how to say it, things like this. It's very, very interesting. You need to be able to switch. Switch is full of switches. The shuttles pull the right switch with gloves, and sometimes you make mistakes. So you need to learn this kind of things. So we did all sorts of training, and time was passing, and 8 years passed from the beginning of the training. It was 8 years, not 6 months, not 1 year, 8 years of training, constantly being under the loop where they look at you, everything you do is evaluated as a question according to the things that I told you before. And then eventually one day I was called in the office of the chief of the astronaut and said, Nespoli, finally, we have assigned you to a flight. It was STS-120. I said, finally, because the shuttle were about to finish. At that time, there were not that many shuttles left. So I got even scared that I will not even fly. But on this flight, STS-120, we brought in space a piece of the space station, which was the Node 2, which was being built by an Italian company under the supervision of the Italian Space Agency. So there was a reason for having an astronaut there. So I was assigned to this crew. There it is, STS-120, Shuttle Transportation System 120. I like to show this picture because, what do you see in this picture? Yeah, nice set of crew, right? I show this in Italy and I say, if you look carefully, you will see 6 American astronauts and 1 foreigner. And as the Americans say, 1 damn foreigner. Meaning that it's interesting because now you are the extra one. What do we let this guy do? What do we not let him do, him or her? So it's a kind of an interesting situation where you're not the main actor. You are, I don't know, on a car, you are the tail light or the brake in the back. So it's kind of interesting. It was a very interesting situation. But I got to fly in space. I got to do a lot of things. They allowed me to do a lot of things. When we were assigned to this mission, it took another year of training altogether. Those 7 guys training all together for the things that were supposed to be done in space station. On this mission. Pamela Melroy, let me. Pamela Melroy was the commander, the mission specialist. George was the pilot. There is Pam, there's George, there is me, mission specialist. I'm essentially in charge of reading procedure, meaning that if there is something to be done, even something simple, there is a procedure. I need to find the procedure, and I need to start reading step by step, and I read one step at a time. For example, step 1, look for switch, all strange names, 426/F. And George is saying, okay, I see it. And Pam says, I concur, meaning, you know, I'm checking that you guys are working right. You're reading the right procedure. You're pointing at the right switch. And then the second step is, you know, the switch should be in position alpha. And George says, I concur. I see it in position alpha. And Pam says, concur. Third step, step number 3, move from position alpha to position bravo. I move into bravo, this position, concur. You know, it's a kind of a complicated situation, but if you train and you do it in team, you actually understand that, you know, you are doing something simple, which is switching a switch, but that switch is potentially very dangerous. If you miss the switch, if you don't do it properly, a shuttle, half of the shuttle can explode. And if you're in space, if half of the shuttle goes away, it's not a good thing. So you better do it correctly. And so you need to do simulation continuously to keep these things up. As we did a lot of robotics training, there was a lot of robotics to take the node 2 from the cargo bay of the shuttle, bring it on the space station. And here it is again, 3 people. It's not one person sitting there alone. It's 3 people working together, making sure that you don't make mistakes and you follow the procedures. Then we did a lot of spacewalk. There's a picture taken at the pool that is in Houston. It used to be one of the biggest pools in the world. You know, 60 meters by 40, 15 meters deep. So when you put the suit on, you can go down all the way to the bottom and you have 15 meters underwater. There are always some safety divers around you, because if this thing leaks and water starts getting in there, guess what happens? The first thing that happens is that you go to the bottom, bang, and then how are you going to come up? How are you going to breathe? So these guys are trained to, you know, take your helmet off, give you a respirator, pull you up. There is a crane, because this thing weighs, you know, 100 and change kilos. So it's not something that you can walk around so easily. There is the day that finally we're ready to launch. After 8 years of training, 1 year additional training as a crew, finally we are launching. And I show this picture because, you know, I always get a question like, yeah, you flew on the space shuttle, which means that you strap yourself to a machine that contained the equivalent energy of a mini atomic bomb. Were you scared? It seems normal that you're supposed to be scared. So I usually show this picture, say, do you see anybody that is crying? I don't want to go on the shuttle. So it's like, finally we are going. You know, I still remember when I came back, a journalist asked me, so were you scared at launch? And I'm like, no. No, because by this time you have built trust on the system. You trust that the people that have worked on the rocket have done the good job. You trust in Houston. You trust on the people that the technicians are there. It's true that around the shuttle, they clear the whole area. There is nobody around the shuttle for 5 kilometers, because if that thing blows up, everything goes dead. So, but, you know, we are kind of not having any problem with it. We actually flew this mission. We flew 15 days, 2 hours and 23 minutes, 3 days more than what it was supposed to be. In fact, we came back, we had very little oxygen left because we had to do a couple of emergency spacewalks. It was a very interesting situation. It was something that at NASA, they were very proud of. They called it like Apollo 13. I don't know if you know what Apollo 13 is. So there's this mission where they had a problem going to the moon. They had to come back. In fact, it was such an incredible thing. It was not publicized so much, but it was so interesting that when we came back the next day to Houston, the President of the United States came with Air Force One, landed, got off, said hello to everybody, thank you for your work, the nation is proud of you, goodbye. And it took off, took off and left. But it was an interesting situation. It was the first time, and still the only time that the President of the United States came and greeted the crew when they came back to Houston. So it was a very interesting situation. So coming back from this flight, I thought, now that I trained 9 years to fly on the shuttle, now that I'm fully qualified, I'm ready to fly again on the shuttle. And in fact, NASA canceled the shuttle. So I thought, interesting. So now I'm trained to fly on a machine, but the machine is not there anymore. What do we do? So I was kind of thinking what I'm supposed to do. And then one day, the phone in my desk rings, and there's the secretary of the chief of the astronaut office. And she's like, the chief wants to see you. And I'm like, what did I do this time? Yeah. And so I showed up at the astronaut office, and the chief is looking at me saying, Paul, I have a good news and a bad news. I don't know if this happens to you here too, but the Americans do this all the time. I have a good news and a bad news. What do you want to hear first? And I'm like, I want to know the good news. And it's like, the good news is that we have assigned you to a space flight. I'm like, wow, I'm going to fly the shuttle again. There are not that many shuttles. Yeah, all right. And he says, before you run too fast, your new title is AC, A means you're in training, and C, I didn't know. And I'm thinking, scratching my head, C, what does it mean? What am I training for? For C? For commander? That cannot be. I'm Italian. It cannot be. I cannot be a commander. So, and it's like, yeah, it means cosmonaut. We are assigning you to a mission on the space station. So you're going to fly on the Russian Soyuz rocket. So get your luggage, go to Russia. It's going to take a year or two to learn Russian, to learn another spacecraft, to learn a computer in Russian, to learn the procedure in Russian, talking to the control center in Russian. And when you're ready, they will make you fly. In fact, they assigned me to Soyuz TMA-20, and the Russian spacecraft is not like the shuttle. I usually say, when I talk to people in Italy, ask me the question all the time, and I say, well, if I have to compare two cars, I would compare the shuttle to the Ferrari, the Soyuz to the Fiat 500. The first one, not the one now remodeled, the first one that came out on the 60s. That's what it is. It's a very, very small spacecraft. I even thought, I'm too tall. I'm looking at the Russian cosmonaut. They're this size, and they look at me like, are you sure you're going to get into the Soyuz? In fact, as of today, I still have the record of being the tallest one that was able to fly on the Soyuz. In principle, I cannot fly on the Soyuz. I'm too tall, according to their number. But the Russians, they're a little bit flexible. And so because of my body type, meaning I have shorter legs than what they're supposed to be, about 2 centimeters too short, and the torso 2 centimeters too long, they can accommodate me inside the Soyuz. Because of this, otherwise I would not be able to fly. So I ended up flying on the Soyuz as the tallest astronaut. They even have to modify a little bit the seat because I could not fit in the seat. So it was an interesting situation. Look at the space; it's very little. This is a visor. I mean, it's an interesting situation. This hatch, which is the only hatch that allows you to go inside there, it's about 80 centimeters wide. 80, so it's something like this. You can imagine you go in there and you feel, the first times I was getting in there, I would put myself in there, squeeze, and then feel like claustrophobic. Because, you know, I have no space to move hands, I have no space to move anything. My head is hitting, my legs are in my mouth. You know, I'm hitting with the legs you cannot see, but there are two controls here that you are hitting constantly with the leg, and the instructor, keep your leg away. Okay, keep it away, but where do I put it? It's not that there is much space. So when the pilot, the commander was flying, which he was supposed to fly only in emergency situation, I would, you know, squeeze myself in a corner to give a little bit of space to move the control and not hit the control. So it was kind of interesting. In fact, how are we doing with time? Who keeps the time under control here? Because, you know, I keep talking, and sure enough, the pasta is cooking too much. Okay, so if somebody needs to go home because the pilmeni are too much cooked, can go. Okay, so space station. Space station is an interesting thing because it is in low Earth orbit, in orbit around the Earth, and erroneously speaking, people think that in space station there is no gravity. This is not true. As an engineering point of view, this is not true. The gravity is pulling the space station towards Earth, but the space station is not still sitting still as it is in this picture, but is actually falling, but is actually traveling on Earth at 28,000 kilometers per hour. 28,000 kilometers per hour is like about 8 kilometers per second. So think of being in a car traveling at 8 kilometers per second. And what this makes is that the station falls down, but it falls down over the horizon. So it falls, it falls, it falls, it falls, it falls, and it falls continuously. You are in free fall continuously. What does it mean? It means that there's no floor. There is no place where you can put your feet. It means that station is falling, you're falling, everything is falling. You don't feel there is gravity. There is gravity, but you don't feel it. It's kind of interesting. It's a little bit like, you know, you are in an elevator. Never happened to you that the elevator sometimes does something like this, and you think, I hope the thing does a snap. And space station is the same. The only thing is that you like for 6 months, and the station doesn't come back. It's kind of interesting. So because of this situation, 400 kilometers away from Earth, 28,000 kilometers per hour, that makes this a perfect laboratory in micro-G. But it's not only a laboratory, it's also home, meaning that you're working there pretty hard for 12 hours, and then you're not working for 12 hours, which is kind of interesting. We just saw before the analog for simulation underwater. It's a small place. And, you know, it's not that you can see, tonight I'm tired, I want to go to a movie with the friends, I want to go to a pizza place, I want to go and have a beer. Doesn't work like that. You are sitting there 6 months in a row. 6 months in a row, and it's kind of an interesting situation. That's why we need analogs. That's why we need people to learn what it means to be in a small place, about like a house, 100 square meters house, and be there in 6 people for 6 months in a row. Same people, working all day, cleaning, not cleaning. You know, it's a kind of an interesting situation. On top of that, the space station is an international space station, which means that countries that are not really happy friend on Earth can work up there. Even today, there are American astronauts, Russian astronauts there is one astronaut from Denmark on board, Andy Mogensen, and sometimes there is Japanese or Canadian. So it's a very interesting situation. I was in a meeting a worldwide meeting of astronauts about a month ago, and there were 40 people, 40 cosmonauts from Russia, 40 American astronauts. The Chinese was there. It was a very interesting situation. So space, it's an interesting analog, and it shows us we can do things, even things that on Earth are kind of difficult. Led us to war. But when we go outside the planet and we look and we behave as part of the human race, then the fact that you have a different flag doesn't really matter. The rest is all the same. So, but NASA understood after they started doing long duration mission that the cognitive skill, professional qualities, and procedural competencies are not enough to take, 5, 6 people in a small environment for a long time. So they, as NASA usually do, they did a lot of working groups, try to study this and that, and they come up after, 2 or 3 years of discussion of what they call human behavioral competencies of soft skills, which means you need to talk about communication, teamwork, leadership, followership, situational awareness, decision-making, problem-solving, cross-gender cultural awareness. So if there is a foreign astronaut or a female or something, or an astronaut of color, black astronaut, you have to be careful about self-care and self-management, because if you're not neat, if you don't clean up after yourself, you work on something, you leave tool around the station, that is a problem. That is a more problem than anything else. So they decided that they need to train all of this. And how do we train them? We train with analogs. And in fact, they started doing crazy things. And of course, I was involved in all of this. For example, I was involved in this. It's called HBP training in Alaska. It was August, as you can see. So they let us on a little island, 7 of us with 5 kayaks, and they said, okay, we'll see you in 15 days, 120 kilometers away. Goodbye. And this is in the middle of nowhere. And it's not that you have a hotel or something. You have to carry whatever you need. We had another training I was lucky enough to do another one of these HBP in Wyoming, but this was at 3,000 meters. I don't know if you've never been at 3,000 meters. You walk and you carry your stuff and you ski 10 or 20 kilometers a day. And then at night it's minus 20, minus 30. You need to build a shelter. Otherwise you're going to be frozen like this next morning. So it's pretty interesting. And this is, it means you need to take care of yourself, but you need to think as a team, because if you're not a team, you're not going to survive in this situation. Same, we had a training in Sardinia called Caves. We were inside the cave in Sardinia. This picture was taken 2.5 kilometers from the entrance. It took like 12 hours to get there. And we knew that if somebody would get hurt in there, it's a problem to get out. It will probably take 15 days to get out if they manage to take you out. And this is something that, makes you think while you're in space, you are in a kind of a strange situation. There is an environment in Florida called Nemo, which is very similar to the one that we saw here, a little bit bigger. This is what they call a spacewalk, but here you are at 20 meters underwater. And once you are saturated, you cannot go up and down. You are sleeping there for 10 days, 12 days, 15 days, 20 days underwater. It's kind of an interesting situation, and the space is very small. The Russians also have their own thing. For example, they usually do what they call winter survival training. They take a Soyuz spacecraft, they throw it in the middle of the forest in winter, and they tell you, okay, goodbye, we'll see you in 3 days. And whatever you have, pieces of parachute, whatever, you have to come up with something to be alive. As, for example, the Russian was kind of funky. This is the Soyuz spacecraft. We were doing training at a certain point, we start seeing smoke. What's going on? And the instructor said, well, you caught fire. I'm like, we caught fire? Yeah, simulated, but you need to act like it's real. So here we are closing the helmet, looking at the procedure, trying to figure out the source of the fire, because it's not that you're in the Soyuz, there is smoke, you open the window, and the smoke goes out. Doesn't work like that. As the same thing happens on space station. This is inside the space station fire. You cannot breathe the air because it's going to kill you. It's going to damage your lungs. So you have to have a respirator. You have to look for the source of the fire. So it's a complicated situation, as there is some type of emergency simulation, like where the atmosphere of the space station is contaminated and you cannot breathe anymore. If you breathe, you die. 2 breaths and you're dead. So there is an interesting, it's a teamwork. As you see, everybody has to take care of themselves, but then there are procedures, there is equipment to measure the air. So it's a complicated situation. Team is very important. Of course, there is multiple control centers all over the world. There's one in Houston, one in Munich, one in Moscow, one in Tsukuba in Japan, one in Huntsville, Alabama. So they are also making sure, and they maintain the space station, because the space station works for 12 hours, and then 12 hours you're sitting there waiting for the next 12 working hours. So I took this picture of the space station, and I usually ask the question, do you think it's neat? Is that clean? What effect do you have looking at a picture of this? I look at it, and it looks to me the room of my daughter. She's 14. When I tell her, clean up, and she's like, yeah, I cleaned up. Oh, it looks like that. In fact, I took this picture at night because there is nobody around. Everybody's kind of sleeping. I turned all the lights on. It took me more than an hour to clean up all the cables and everything, and then I took the picture. So as far as I'm concerned, it's very in order in this situation. But then the point that I want to make here is that station is really peculiar because, here on ground, if I need to work up there, I probably need a stair to go up there. And it's going to be I need to be careful. But on the station, at the beginning, I would read some procedure that said, I need to go up here to work. Are there stairs? So I look at the other guys and they look at me like, no, you just go up. And you're thinking, are you sure I can go up? And then you try, and eventually you can go up. And something strange really happens. The brain is kind of strange, because when you go up in this situation, first of all, you think, oh, probably I will feel something strange, but nothing. You feel absolutely nothing, which is kind of disconcerting for the brain. It's like, I'm up on the wall and I don't feel absolutely anything. Actually, what happens is that the brain is turning the station, and you feel the station is upside down. Actually, you don't feel anything. You feel whatever is above your head as the ceiling, whatever is below your feet, whatever it is, it's automatically so it's kind of an interesting situation. This is the working day. Working day is set up so that you start working at 7:30 in the morning, and then because the control center wants to make you work, to use as much as possible. So they come up, they spend a lot of time, the planner, to put together all these little things so that 6 people can work in a very small environment. Everybody has to work. You cannot sit down and say, hey, I cannot work because there is no space for me. They find a way so that you work while somebody else is working, while, they have meal, they have exercise every day. So it's kind of an interesting situation. here is the food. And since we are talking about food, right? One of we will talk about, but one of the things is that food is something that I always get a question. But this is the kind of a typical lunch prepared by one of my colleagues. Everything is already cooked and prepared. You cannot, cook a pasta or, pilmeni or whatever. You have to take already something already prepared. So one day I was doing a video con with a school, and few minutes were left at the end. So a NASA manager, which was there, I didn't know that he was there. He asked me, "So Paolo, what do you think about food?" And I'm like, okay. So here's the Italian gets the question about food. And I could not say, "Oh, it's okay." But, it's very hard to prepare the food like that. So I kind of made a joke and said, "Hey, you know what? A couple of days ago, I called the pizzeria near my house and I ordered a pizza." Of course, I did not tell I was calling from the station. But then I said, "So where do we send it?" "Well, they send it to the space station." And it's like, "What? Say again?" "To the space station." "Ah, Paolo, this is you. Ah, you're on the station." "Sorry, cannot send it to the space station." So I wanted to make a joke, and the guy, I saw the guy kind of scratching his head and said, "Well, we will think about it." So a couple of weeks later, a spacecraft comes up, and we hear Houston saying, "Okay, as soon as you pick up the supply vessel, go to drawer 452, there is a surprise." So we get inside there, and there was a package to build pizzas. And so if you go online and you look for space pizza, you probably get a little movie that we filmed. This is a frame of the movie. But when I'm in Italy, I like to ask the question, how many pizzas do you see up there? 4. 4 pizzas. How many astronauts? So I asked the Americans, "You have a 20-ton spacecraft. Why you send 4 pizza for 6 astronauts?" It's against the Italian tradition. You cannot have. So there you are, 2 without pizza. Oh, I'm like, this is nuts. But this is cultural situation. So here we are. So we eat, but we do also 2 hours of exercise, cardiovascular, in a cycle ergometer or in a treadmill. There is a machine that allows us to do weight training in a place where there is no weight, so it's kind of interesting. But this thing being built by NASA engineers, spend a lot of money to build this thing. But then we do also something, quote unquote, more serious. This is Karen working on some plants. This is Randy working on some chemical thing. This is Peggy working on a little satellite built by MIT. This is Randy working on genetic experiments. This is me being a guinea pig, because you are in space, you think you are the good guy, and then you are the one that they make experiment on. Here, for example, Ron is measuring my eye, because they turn out that in space the eye is kind of changing. There are some problems, so they're trying to understand what's going on. Then, once in a while you have to do some maintenance because something, the environmental control and life support system doesn't work, so you have to or fix it or maintain it. Then there is some electrical problem. You work as an electrician, so you start as a plumber, then you are an electrician, then something mechanical is broken, so you take a screwdriver and you start working as a mechanic. Then, station gets dirty, and every week you need to clean it. So it's kind of interesting that you end up doing all sorts of things like this. And then once in a while something strange happens, like this is one of the Italian astronauts, Samantha, talking to a school. But then, another day she was talking to the President of the Republic, and then later on she was talking to the Pope. So So it's kind of interesting because you might look at the schedule and it says, okay, you start fixing the toilet, then you talk to a school, then you talk to the President of the Republic, then you talk to the Pope, and then you end up finishing working on the toilet. So the point is, what is the most important things of all the one that I mentioned so far? The toilet is working. Or talk to the Pope, okay, but the toilet is working or not? Because I need to go. You know, this is kind of interesting how things can change in space. So I think we will stop here. What do you think? Should we? 3 minutes? No. Let's see if there are some questions. Go ahead. Thank you. I still have 3 minutes, so we'll do questions, and then I'll take my 3 minutes. Okay. Go ahead.
We are pretty flexible in this time, I guess. So I think we still have some time for questions. So yeah, the field is open for your questions. Yeah, I see that one. Okay, so. Yeah.
And you can ask the question in Czech. You'll translate it. Maybe.
Hello again, Mr. Nespoli, Simon speaking. I would like to ask you, what do you...
Simon?
Yes, it's me again. I would like to ask you, what do you think helped you the most on your way to becoming an astronaut? And do you have some advice you would give to your younger yourself?
It's a 3-hour answer question. It's a complicated question because, you know, this idea of becoming an astronaut is kind of nuts. Not because it's a nuts idea, but because the possibility of becoming an astronaut are very small. So the chances are very small. It's like, you know, I want to win the $300 million or million euros or whatever Corona's lottery ticket. Can I do that? Well, if I buy 300 million of tickets, I will win 300 million, but that doesn't work like that usually. So I think the advice that I tell people when they tell me, I want to be an astronaut, what should I do? I cannot tell them, are you sure you want to be an astronaut? It's a pain in the neck. You may end up waiting 10 years, training, being observed. Everything you do is observed. Any move you make is judged. Is this guy good? It's good. Does he work good in a team? Does he respond coherently? And it's very difficult to follow these things. So I don't know. I would even advise people not to become astronauts. Not because it's difficult, but because it's a long time to wait. I mean, on top of that, right now, things are kind of changing. You know, there are private astronauts, commercial astronauts. ESA just selected a bunch of astronauts, and I'm pretty sure this guy will fly maybe in what, 10 years, 15 years? I don't know. See, so be careful. What I tell people, when you choose a profession that you want to do in your life, you need to choose something that you're comfortable with. You need to look inside yourself and look what is your passion, what makes you have fun, because there is nothing better than live your life having fun, and if you do correctly, being paid at the end of the month. So it's kind of an interesting situation. So look at yourself at what you want to do. You know, I could say, you know, I want to be a taxi driver. I want to be a barber. I want to be a, I don't know, pizza maker. It doesn't matter what you do, is how you do it that makes a difference. So look at yourself. Some works look very glamour. You know, want to be an actor, I want to be a soccer player, I want to be something. But do you have what it takes? Can you take all the other stuff that come with it? Think seriously about this when you choose what you want to do when you grow up. And if being an astronaut is what you want, go ahead and try to be an astronaut. Yes, it's almost impossible, but there are people that become an astronaut. I don't even know why I was selected on my third try. I don't even know. I cannot tell you. But it happened, which means that it can happen. So,
thank you.
Thank you. Maybe I will just make the question even more specific, because a lot of people here are students of engineering, and especially mechanical engineering. Basically, who is here from mechanical engineering? So,
well, I am an aerospace engineer, so mechanical and aerospace engineer, more or less the same thing. And it's kind of interesting. A lot of people go through mechanical engineering or aerospace engineering thinking that it will make them closer to being an astronaut. And I tell people, probably you have more chance of being selected if you are, I don't know, a veterinarian, an oceanographer, or something completely crazy, because there are a gazillion of aerospace engineers or mechanical engineers that want to be an astronaut. There are very few, veterinarians that want to be an astronaut. So think twice or three times.
Okay. So another question? Yeah.
When you have shown us your photo while getting on board of the shuttle, you said that you were not scared, and you commented, well, look at the photo. There's nobody scared to go there because they're going on the shuttle. I would like to remind you that somebody passed away flying on the shuttle. So, but would be maybe more respectful to avoid such kind of remarks and jokes about that.
Harsh remark. Okay. Okay. So maybe.
No. I mean, I do have full respect. I mean, the people that died were my friends too, and in fact, one of the people that died on the last shuttle was in my class. Was in that picture that you saw before. I came before becoming an astronaut. I was in the Army, and I was in the Special Forces, and it was a very tough environment. And we were 150 or 120 in the Special Forces. Every year, somebody would die because of a training accident, because whatever, because not driving properly, because parachute did not open, all sorts of things. And we learned to understand that life is not a guarantee. Life is something that you do. Nobody tells you that you're safer. Don't do anything. I told, there was a kid, he was asking more or less the same question, and I kind of look at him and says, do you think going on a bicycle is dangerous? And he's like, no. I said, do you remember when you were trying to go on a bicycle and you fall down many, 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 many times? There is one guy that grew up in my little town that actually got killed in a Tour of Italy thing. So it's kind of, you kind of, I don't know what to say, kind of accepting the faith. Okay. I don't, well, I'm not sure I understand, but okay.
Okay, maybe, so another question? We still have some time. Oh, yeah, there's one, please, yeah.
Yeah, it's okay.
Yeah, hopefully the recording will get it. Oh yeah, the microphone is there already.
Okay. So you have a personal experience with both Soyuz and Space Shuttle, which are very different spacecraft. Which training did you find more tougher? Which one was more easier? Or can we even say it like this?
Well, so the question is comparing the training given by NASA for flying the space shuttle or given by GCTC, the Russian space agency, to fly the Soyuz.
Yes.
Well, there are two different trainings, there are two different vehicles, there are even two different philosophies. I think the astronauts, they are more involved in designing, building, and following the spacecraft, astronauts in the United States. The cosmonauts are more trained like operator, more than people involved in building the spacecraft. So I would say somehow it's easier in Russia, even though you're dealing with Cyrillic, with the different language, different philosophy. It's like the machine, the Soyuz is much less complicated, and the shuttle doesn't need so much training. It still needs a lot of training, but not so much as the shuttle. So I would say it's easier to fly on the Soyuz today than the shuttle. But then, you know, the shuttle is not flying anymore. They are flying now with the Dragon, they are flying with different vehicles. And one thing that the Americans usually do, they learn from things they do. And they figured out that the shuttle was far too complicated. The new vehicles are much simpler, much easier to handle, much less stressful than the crew. And this is what we're going to use in the future. So I don't know, I did not fly on the new vehicle, but I see that the people that have flown, they say, oh, this is very easy compared to the shuttle. Still complicated because you're still flying a spacecraft, but it's much easier. So things are evolving in a certain way. And somehow I think the Dragon is probably a newer version of a Soyuz spacecraft.
Thank you.
So should I take?
Okay. So maybe one last question. Yeah, maybe one or two, depending on how long they will be. Okay. So you're closer. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Did your childhood expectations of being an astronaut match your career? Like when you were a kid, when you expected what it would be to be an astronaut, did the expectations were fulfilled or no?
Well, what is your name? Max. That's an interesting question. It's an interesting question for an engineer. It's actually an interesting question for everybody. I really had fun in the years that I spent as an astronaut. Yes, I was under stress, but I got to do a lot of things. It was kind of funny in Alaska, in Wyoming, at Nemo, caves here and there. So all challenging situations. But then what is challenging? What is not challenging? What people believe something is too much and something is not much enough. So it's a kind of philosophical question. So if you ask me, I think I'm satisfied of having wanted to be an astronaut, satisfied of finally being selected, satisfied of being able to fly 3 times in space. I've spent more than 300 days up there. I don't know if I could have, come up with a different profession. I've been satisfied. So today I'm satisfied. But that's a hard kind of questions. I don't know, from a psychological point of view, you look at your life and, I'm retired and I'm thinking, did I spend my life effectively, efficiently, had fun? How do you decide? Do I have a $3 billion put aside? Was money important? Was more what I did? So these are all questions that you need to ask yourself. If money is important, then go and do something else, because astronaut will not make you rich. Maybe famous if you break the space station, but rich for sure not. So So it depends what you want to do. You want to be, you know, things like Bill Gates, like, I don't know, Elon Musk, something that you have to decide for yourself. And, you know, I'm pretty sure even Elon Musk or even Bill Gates has some dark moments in his life. But that's life. It's always like this life.
So that was the last question, I guess, yeah.
You mentioned that you had like 2 years for learning Russian. So I was wondering whether you like really learned Russian in those 2 years to speak it fluently. And regarding languages, whether it's like the fact that you speak also Italian like an advantage, or everything was in English and it really doesn't matter how many languages people speak.
I don't know if this is a kind of a fair question, because I ended up being a Russian and meeting a Russian girl, lady, whatever you want to call it, and getting married. So my wife is Russian. Though when I try to speak Russian, she looks at me and says, forget about it, let's speak English. Okay, so if somebody asks me, do you speak Russian? I usually say, well, the technical Russian I can speak. So I can describe if the spacecraft is rolling, pitching, yawning, this kind of strange terms that Russian people look at you like, huh? I never heard this term. You know, it's like somebody's talking about a sailboat. You know, they come up with some strange things that seems to come from Middle Age or something like that. Yeah, I can speak that Russian, no problem. To the control center, I can speak, I can tell them. But then, if my wife asks me, tomorrow 5 o'clock, can you come by bus on this place in town? I cannot. There is so many conjunctions, so many things in there. You know, I kind of learned to chew up the ending on the words. I don't know how it's Czech, but Russian, you know, the ending is very important, and I kind of chew them up because I cannot conjugate. So I was like, okay, chew them up, you figure out yourself. And sometimes they look at me like, huh? I don't understand. Oh, okay. So I cannot say I speak Russian. I speak technical Russian, that yes. Okay.
Okay, so I think our time is up. So I thank very much Paolo Nespoli. I thank very much I think Maria Kristina Parvela and Jan Spratek for having the opportunity to have this guest here. And I would like to thank you all for coming and making a very nice atmosphere today. So thank you again.